You know, I feel that in the whole labor versus capital debate, labor has been really overrepresented. You've got labor unions and all these activists. They're constantly giving you labor's side. Let's hear what capital has to say.
Questions came up about defending capitalism. And Warren, you did step out and say that you're a card-carrying member, a card-carrying capitalist in front of everyone. What do you think about the attacks that we've seen to this point on capitalism?
You guys get cards?
The capitalism is perfect, but if you look at what was here in 1776 and look at what is here now, this country has done an incredible job in terms of the deployment of resources and human ingenuity, and that is a product of a system. Now, does that mean that every decision should be made simply by open market determinants?
Buffett making a really solid point there. I always thought he was some sort of like leftist. I know his father, Howard Buffett, was a legendary libertarian congressman.
Oh, there's a need for regulation, obviously, and there are things that have long-term costs and might not get built in. But the idea of people unleashing their potential, using the resources they have to create what we have now from what was here 240-some years ago, it's absolutely a miracle, and what all three of us have seen during our lifetime. And if you compare that with any centralized planned economy, I think we win hands down, and I think we've just started with what capitalism can produce in the United States. But I do think
Base Buffett point of view. No wonder this guy's got $50 billion in the bank.
I think obviously it needs certain rules and regulations.
Bill, you did an interview in Davos with someone, and you made a pretty innocuous statement that you looked around, you thought capitalism was the best system, and you got attacked online from all these people who came up with these crazy statements about how could you say things like that. I mean,
okay, first of all, you could say the sky is blue, and you're going to get attacked by the idiots online. That's what they do.
What do you think about the climate when you see things like that?
Well, some people think when you defend capitalism, you're defending the tax rates we have today and saying that higher absolute tax rates or more progressive tax rates, that you're disagreeing with them. And I don't think...
Yeah, of course I disagree with them. They're already too high. What you should have is a flat tax. And not even flat percentage-wise. Like, everybody should just have to chip in $500. That'll fund the federal government. See how far it gets you.
Warren and I are disagreeing that you could make the...
If they run out of money, they can start a GoFundMe page. Make up the difference.
Taxes more progressive. In fact, we've been very explicit in some areas, like the estate tax, and saying we think that would be a good thing. Socialism...
You got your wish, it came back.
Socialism used to mean that the state controlled the means of production. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people were promoting...
It still does. I mean, even under other versions of socialism, you're still going to have some centralized planning. And I mean, there's no way you can't smuggle the state back into existence. There's still going to be people in control of the shared store of resources. But
socialism actually aren't using that classic definition. So what we're going to...
I mean, socialist, it's like every single person has their own idea of socialism. So you can say, oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about because blah, blah, blah. But honestly, it's ridiculous.
What we're going to have is capitalism with some level of tax.
And the other thing is they've all got their own definition of capitalism. It no longer means capitalism is the private ownership of the means of production. You get stuff like bailouts or going to war in Iraq. That's all capitalism. For communists or socialists, capitalism is whenever anything bad happens in the middle of the world. They say, oh well, people are starving to death in Zimbabwe. That's because of capitalism. Like Zimbabwe is some hotbed of liberal thought.
Taxation, most people really aren't arguing against capitalism. There may be a few, but most people are just saying that the taxes should change.
Although you do have someone who I think is polling the second highest in the Democratic Party right now, who was a socialist until very recently, Bernie Sanders.
Well, whether or not he was a socialist by the full term of that, now there is some muddy areas. When you start to say there shouldn't be any billionaires, that you have some cap on wealth or something like that, that goes beyond what I think.
That's a good point, though. Most people, what they consider socialism, is really just the welfare state or interventionism. Although Ludwig von Mises argued that interventionism was unstable and that society's going to inexorably go either towards socialism or towards capitalism. But most people, they're just in favor of like a social safety net, a welfare state, a la, the Nordic example or Canada. I mean, even the United States has a pretty progressive welfare state. Although most people, I guess, don't want to believe that. But you look at the amount of government spending on the poor in terms of well, Snap. I mean, I don't really know the programs, but there's a tremendous amount of welfare state spending, with HUD and all that in the states as well.
And you could say I'm self-interested, but
Really? We will exempt the present ones. No, but government needs to reallocate some resources. I mean, the extreme case would be in World War II. I mean, that's the closest we've come to socialism. You had an Office of Price Administration. You had a War Production Board. But during peacetime, you're always prepared for war, and you do that through government. Government needs to reallocate some resources, but the market system, which exists under capitalism, is an extraordinarily effective way, and has proven it, of using resources, human and other kinds, to produce incredible goods. And Henry Ford could devise a system that could turn out a couple million cars a year, but he could only use half a dozen himself, or his whole family could use 50. I mean, he had to turn out a couple million cars that other people got to use, and that.
In fact, the factory system, since its inception in England, and industrialization in the United States, is the same thing. Is they produced for the masses, for the poor. That's always been what capitalism has been all about. Not only did it, because the situation in England when industrialization occurred in the 18th century, was you had this massive growing population, and at the same time the economy up to that point had been very rigid, and it couldn't accommodate the new people, because you would have like every town would have like the blacksmith and the innkeeper and so on and so forth, and everybody had their own little territory, and there was no dynamism like you would find in the modern market economy. Everybody had their own little areas, sort of their own little economic fiefdom. You had grants of monopoly from the crown. It's very common. This was during the time of absolutism, and what happened was, so you had this massive increase in population because, as time goes on, technology improves under any system, and you start having a food surplus, and babies are born, and so the population was growing very rapidly at the time, and there was just no way to accommodate all these people, um, and then the factory system came around and employed them, which was miraculous because it offered economic opportunity to people that had none, that were in a very desperate situation, and then, but it also produced stuff for them because who else is going to buy all these consumer goods? Rich people, they want like more handmade crafts, like really hoity-toity stuff. They want that silk imported from Asia or whatever. They want the really fine stuff. But the factories were producing mass market crap for the people, by the people, and that's what the whole economy grew out of. And just like Buffett's saying with Ford, the workers drove the cars, and it was all for mass market for the poor, basically the working class, and then that whole system enabled the production of sort of more quality stuff for I mean for like for example, mass market books like Jeffrey Archer or whatever allows for the whole, somebody who's writing really good literature.
That would not have, in my view, I think if you'd set up a government bureau in 1850 and given them 100 years to develop a car, I'm not so sure that you'd have ever come up with anything like the assembly lines of Ford and all of the things that have happened. Human ingenuity is incredible, and you want something that maximizes its use and then curbs a few of the ideas that some of those people may have to sort of have it fall for themselves.
Charlie, you've made the same point.
The great proof of how capitalism works is China. When China copied Singapore and let the farmers own their own plots and let the manufacturers own their own businesses and so forth, China's productivity increased many times, and they went from rural poverty to modern extreme wealth. And they
It's like Laffer said in his debate with this communist guy. China went from 100% state-owned industry to like 10%. Everything became privately owned, free market competition, and that's when China's economic boom happened because they adopted a lot of market reforms, still within dictatorial or a communist one-party political system, but economically they moved much more towards private ownerships of the means of production. You've got so many more billionaires in China today because of their industry magnets.
did by adopting a fair amount of capitalism. Now, if a Democratic politician doesn't understand that, he's nuts.
You've made the same point, though, Charlie, that you think private sector does it much better than the government sector. However, a lot of these people who are running also want to make government much bigger. Do you have a quarrel with that or no?
Well, as they say, if you love your post office, you're going to love socialized medicine.
Yeah, and they don't necessarily want to make it bigger in terms of redistributing. They may want to. The market system is brutal, and it leaves behind people who are perfectly wonderful people.
I don't agree with that. I don't think the market system is brutal at all. The competition, the brutal competition, is between firms. I mean, capitalism, we've seen continually faster growing wage rates for everybody. I don't accept that. I think that in the market economy, interactions are mutually beneficial. They're harmonious. People making trades, win-win trades. The reason you trade is because you expect a benefit, and you're usually right about that because you know what your ends are. You've got a lifetime of worth of experience judging whether a trade is going to benefit you or not based on whatever your various ends may be. So I don't accept that from Buffett that the market system is brutal. I think that's a common criticism. I think it's misplaced because really in the market economy, everybody's just sort of helping each other by exchanging, by trading. They're providing value to each other. Um, and really the law of the jungle or the brutal system is the state, which takes from one and gives to somebody else, and they like to pretend like it's Robin Hood. They're just robbing from the rich and giving to the poor, but the reality is quite different. Often the poor and the marginalized are the ones who are robbed from with the state policies. For example, tariffs, right? That targets consumers, including poor consumers. There's a lot of redistribution away from the relatively poor to the wealthy as well within the modern state. So I don't accept that.
who don't have market-related talents. And
Or who are just unlucky.
yeah, just plain unlucky. And in a rich society, believe me, if we have a war or something like that, we call on those people and pay them practically nothing to go fight for us. And we want goods flowing, but it's going to displace the textile worker that we used to have and so on. So the function of government is not necessarily to get bigger. It may be in an important way to take.
I don't accept that either about the textile worker. I mean, yes, free trade kills jobs, but it also creates new jobs. That's part of a dynamic market economy. Um, it's I mean, okay, there's some short term pain maybe, but uh, at the same time, the end result is lower prices of goods, which is good for everybody. So the benefits far outweigh the minor costs associated with. Okay, there's no textile industry, but you can still, be a Walmart greeter, work retail, or work in a fast food place, work in a restaurant, or do any of these other jobs, service sector jobs here. But the result, as a result of free trade, I mean, free trade kills jobs; it creates jobs too, and often for the lower class.
Take care of people who, for one reason or another, get left behind in a market system that you also regard as essentially this huge source of wealth and goods and services.
So how do you fix the problems, or at least the perception of problems, which there's a huge perception out there in the American voting right now?
Obviously, it would help if our government were wiser. And it would be wiser if the two sides didn't hate each other so much. Anger drives out reason. And there is absolute cold fury between politicians on one side and politicians on the other. It's quite counterproductive. For that reason, I don't allow myself to get angry at politicians.
How would you fix it?
Well, I just don't let myself get that angry at politicians. I don't expect them to be
Berkshire
perfect.
has worked better because Charlie and I have never been mad at each other.
Yeah.
It just does. I mean, way better. If we got mad at each other, I'd try and kill his deals. He'd try and kill my deals. It just doesn't work that way.
We don't need a couple of alpha males blustering at one another over this stuff. They ought to just cool it and take a little reputational hit and get the feathers ruffled down.
We ought to worry about the people that don't fit into the system. We want the system. And a lot of people are getting left further and further behind because as capitalism gets more advanced, it gets more specialized, and there actually is greater difference between the haves and the have-nots. And the haves can take care of the have-nots.
But I don't think it matters if there's a bigger difference between the haves and the have-nots. What matters is the absolute standards of the have-nots. Now, to a degree, wage rates for low-income workers, the working class, if you will, haven't kept up to where they should. But it's precisely because of the big government, high taxes, confiscatory tax rates. That's what keeps wages low, because all that money is spent on consumption. All government spending is consumption, and so when you tax people in the private productive sector and redistribute that wealth to the political class so they can spend it on nice homes and vacations and whatever they spend their money on, nice cars. I mean, Ottawa is one of the richest cities in Canada. So when you do that, that takes money out of the economy that would have been reinvested in capital, as well as people would have enjoyed higher incomes, um, and higher return on investment, as they should. They're creating the wealth in the first place, but also would have been reinvested in the economy. Would have been saved. A lot of it would have been saved because a lot of people, especially who are more well-to-do in the economy, are already consuming at the rate they want to consume. So more income for them, which is a point that leftists make all the time, isn't going to lead to more consumption, right? So what are they going to do with the money? They're going to save it. They're going to invest it, and that becomes more capital. That becomes funneled to capital, non man-made factors of production, capital like factories or whatever, and that makes workers more productive, which leads to higher salaries. But when you have these really high tax rates, like we have in every Western nation, then that whole process gets interrupted, and you have a slowdown in capital accumulation, and hence wages stagnate or grow at a rate less than they should. So to the degree that's happening, the problem is tax rates, and then the problem is the central bank, the money supply, which is inflationary, and which erodes savings as well. Because why would you save when your money's going to be worth less next year than it is now? You're better off consuming or even going into debt and borrowing. Um, so I don't think capitalism leaves people behind. I think that's to the degree that's happening, it's a result of government policy. Capitalism, it's a tide that uh, rises all ships. As you see in Hong Kong, when they adopted laissez-faire capitalism after World War II. You saw tremendous economic growth for all segments of society, especially the working class, the people working the lowest paying jobs. They saw per capita income increase hundredfold, over 40 years. Um,
Interesting is both parties basically agree on that. They just
Yes, how you get there that gets complicated.
Income tax credit.
And then the other thing is the minimum wage. So yes, some people are excluded because of the minimum wage, which prices them out of the marketplace. There would be jobs for them, but progressives pass this policy, without really understanding the economic consequence of price controls, which do lead to unemployment for low skilled workers. So that's another big factor. People, you want to talk about people getting left behind. Well, they're left behind because of government policy, not because of the capitalist system. Let's get real.
It can make a huge jump in that direction. I mean, Social Security. We've done various things over the years. We have improved. We've improved.
Social Security is another transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. Do you think the people that are paying Social Security taxes on average are as wealthy as the people that receive it, considering it's not even means tested? No. The people who receive it, people in their 60s, their 70s, a lot of them have substantial investment portfolios. A lot of them have savings. Um, so this is redistribution of wealth from the relatively poor, people in their 20s and their 30s who often don't have any savings. A lot of them are in debt. They just got out of school. They have a negative net worth, but they're forced to pay a tax, so that money can go to these people in retirement, often quite wealthy. And that's just what I was talking about. How a lot of the time when you have redistribution of wealth, it's not necessarily from the rich to the poor, although they like to present it that way, and often it is that way too. There is a lot of redistribution of wealth, or at least confiscation of wealth from the poor doesn't always or from the rich doesn't always make its way to the poor, but there is a certain element, when programs aren't means tested, there is going to be some redistribution from the poor to the rich as well.
improved the public school systems. We've improved things that do give people more of an equal chance and take care of people who fall by the wayside. We just got to keep doing it.